Sweet, thank you. Donut.js is great. This is my favorite meetup in town. Yep. So, I don't know. I was renaming the talk to fit on a slide because I found these jazzy slides and they were, I don't know, just didn't fit. So let's just go with this one, Life as a Volunteer Software Engineer at a Nonprofit Radio Station, and see what happens. Oh, there's that guy. I'm Mark, and I do mobile at a company called The Dirt, and I also do music, and I do play records at your favorite bars and clubs as DJ Judy Gloom. And I also have a show on a radio station called, well, the radio station is called Freeform Portland. The show is called Blue Rose Task Force. And it's a very small, low-power FM community radio station. It's Freeform Portland. Anyway, they should have put that at the top, I'm not sure. Anyway, so yeah, Freeform Portland. So what is that about, this radio thing now? I didn't know that was still a thing. So when I moved to Portland 2.5 years ago, I saw that this was a thing that existed, and I have always liked the radio, so I thought, hey, why don't I apply for a show? It might be a good way to get to know people in the at least music-loving people in Portland, and I got a show, so that was really exciting. All DJs are required to do 5 hours, I think that's right, of volunteering at the station. And when I saw that there was a, quote, web committee, I thought, awesome, that's totally me, I'm going to join that. That's a mural that's painted on the side of our station. That's on Killingsworth and Elbine is the cross street right there. Anyways, you can, I think it has the 90.3 on it. That's going to change. Anyway. To give you a sense of the kind of tech issues we have at Freeform, consider an audio web stream like of our broadcasts. So larger stations, and I'm not talking about corporate stations like iHeartRadio or whatever, but I'm talking about like KCRW or NPR stations, stuff like that. They use third-party services like StreamGuys, which is basically radio web streaming as a service, which is cool. But what about tiny low-power stations with extremely limited budgets and little or no paid staff? Well, you find the cheapest and best option, like a, for instance, 20-year-old open source project called Icecast, released in 1998. Dockerize it for rapid deployment and portability across providers and better security, and then deploy it via the easiest means available, which was AWS Fargate at the time. And then move on to the next problem. So, yeah, Freeform Portland. What is it? Freeform Portland, we started our terrestrial broadcast in 2016. On KFFP LP 90.3 FM, and just this past October 1st on KFFD LP 98.3 FM, which is really exciting for us because now we have a better coverage of the city. Anyways, it's a freeform station, which means that DJs can pretty much play whatever they want in accordance with FCC broadcast rules and are not beholden to corporate or commercial interests. We're a 501c3 licensed, is that right? 501c3 licensed nonprofit. And it's 100% volunteer run, which means no one's getting paid. Yep, that's right. Everyone who does work for the station in any capacity is an unpaid volunteer. We broadcast 24/7, 365, and have a new DJ coming into the station to play music for you all every 2 hours. And it's 100% right now private donation funded. We've got no grants or underwriting yet, and our operational budget is extremely slim. Essentially, every dollar goes into station operations, keeping the lights on, rent paid, transmitter transmitting, and so on. Organizationally, station operations are broken down into committees where we have like a music library committee, a programming committee responsible for the schedule, et cetera, social media marketing, broadcast ops, web software, and so on. Each committee has a chair or leader, and there's loosely a charter that defines the scope of the committee. I'm on the web committee, which is web. And we're responsible for the primary station website, freeformportland.org. The means by which songs are tracked for legal reporting purposes, a variety of station-related data, including volunteer accounts, shows, schedules, etc. Lines of communication, including an internal wiki, storage of broadcast archive files, and their availability, the web stream, a merch store, fundraising shop, and a bunch of other stuff as whatever it comes up. So more than a couple of things. So when I first joined up, this is what there was. There was a WordPress site being used for rendering the public front end. as well as for being a user service for authenticating DJs. So if you just imagine, if you know WordPress at all, that all the DJs are WordPress editors, if that makes sense. The playlist manager application had no authentication. It was just open to the public. The infrastructure was spread over a variety of providers, including Media Temple, DigitalOcean, had DNS through Squarespace. Yeah, I don't know. We'd also not reported any of our playlists to SoundExchange, which is a digital performance rights company, and that is actually a legal requirement for streaming music online. So there's that. The WordPress site wasn't under version control. I didn't want to touch that really, and so I started by seeing whether I could improve the playlist management app, which was on GitHub. But I could not get it to run locally. The author was not responding to questions. It's cool, we were all busy. He was a volunteer too, I totally get it. But it was also deployed on the author's infrastructure, which no one at the station had access to. It was somewhat of a problem. Let's see, what have we here? Yes, so big picture tech needs. Okay, so my initial assessment of our tech was that we had a few things to address. One, security was a pretty big concern. We have a lot of DJs and volunteers who were given accounts on the WordPress site. Something like 100 DJs at the time, maybe 50 to 60 more volunteers. It's a lot. A lot of accounts to worry about with the WordPress site. The admin sign-on page is notoriously a target. Probably more than one person in here knows that, for brute force attacks. Also, the playlist manager really needed an authentication layer for data accuracy, so, you know. Maintainability. So the WordPress site has a custom theme or whatever. I'm totally ignorant of WordPress stuff. Who am I kidding? I should not touch that thing. The playlist app was React and an Express API connected to MongoDB, which I do know stuff about, but without being able to spin one up locally or track down the author with questions, neither of those resources are very maintainable. There was also the infrastructure being everywhere, and there was an incident where we had our DNS expired. Nobody knew about it. Site was down for a week. That was not great. So we need to, anyway. And legal requirements. We have to report our playlist to SoundExchange, which means we need a way to get the data out of the database, but again, without access, this is somewhat of a problem. And so to break it, to frame this in a slightly different way, we have all these needs like volunteer needs, DJs, legal requirements, public-facing needs like the website, internal-facing needs, and committee chairs have also a special set of needs that were kind of spread across a different range of technologies. But okay, so yeah, how do we do this? We need to be able to deploy, build, and maintain software solutions with a really slim budget and all volunteer developers. No problem. Step one, find an over-enthusiastic volunteer, like that idiot, and and then determine the most pressing need or needs, which in our cases I would say was complying with the law and also this role-based authentication. So there's a lot of third-party SaaS options for larger stations for doing all of that stuff, really. But they're stations with larger budgets, so they're typically older products as well. They have their own quirks, and stations usually don't roll their own solutions because they usually don't have the resources. For us, though, I decided that we just needed to build our own solution after talking with a lot of people and doing some research that was tailored to our specific needs, which are generic enough to actually have the software publicly available in case another small radio station wants to use it. And so it's on GitHub, actually, and I'll link to that later. So architecture decisions. So here's a really important thing to think about when you have volunteer resources. It's like, what skills do your volunteer developers have or are willing to learn? I was doing Node and React for quite a while, so it seemed like the most obvious choice. Plus JavaScript is, of course, one of those languages that's very popular, maybe the most popular, depending on what data you're looking at. So it seems like a safe choice. React is also quite popular, but not everyone knows it, and it can be a learning curve anyway. Ultimately, I went with that just because it makes me more productive on the front end. I was the only person working on it at the time. Project scope. Yep, this is a problem. So we needed a way to introduce more robust security via role-based authentication layer and decouple users from the WordPress site. And it seemed like a good opportunity to build that in the MVP of the playlist app replacement, which I had been calling very cleverly the admin, or KFFP admin, which actually probably shouldn't call it anymore because we have more than one call. Anyway, and engineers are terrible at naming things, so nobody's complained that I know of. So the admin MVP was users, shows, schedules, playlist management, and then when that was being sort of iterated on. It was reporting was added so that we could actually make those sound exchange requirements. That's cool. Oh, and then wait, here's a problem. What do we do for data? So there was a substantial automated data migration from WordPress that needed to happen, and also we needed to crawl our own website to obtain that playlist data because we didn't have access to it in order to see the new Mongo cluster, which I spun up on EC2. But after that, we needed to be able to move forward with new data and weighing the cost of managed services like Mongo Atlas, which is their own thing, Mongo Lab, which I think they just bought, and versus self-managed things, which are cheaper in one respect. Like an EC2 instance obviously costs less than Atlas, but you have to factor in the human maintenance and management cost for a volunteer organization. And so I started with a managing cluster on EC2, but didn't have enough free time in addition to the other things I was trying to prioritize, so I convinced the director to let me use Atlas. We're using a very low-cost option that works for us scale-wise, and that they just upgraded their clusters to version 4 of the... Anyway, doesn't matter. So it's going to be time to do some maintenance on that. But the tier we use doesn't have backups, so hey, we needed a solution for that, which is like, great, now solve another problem. This is pretty much what it's like. But here's where it gets interesting, because now you get the opportunity to maybe try something new. So I'd been looking for a reason to start using AWS Lambda, which is the symbol there. They all look alike, so it's really hard to tell. I would not blame you. I'd been looking for a reason to start using it. Serverless is the future and whatever. So I thought, hey, I'll use a Lambda to back up this Mongo cluster. That would be cool. But it turns out that while you can trigger Lambdas with CloudWatch events, you can't, that don't have static IPs, and I need to add static IP to the Mongo allow list in order for it to work properly. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Cloud events, so I ended up just having CloudWatch trigger a Lambda. The Lambda will actually fire off a request to start up an EC2 instance. That thing has an upstart script that will then call out to Mongo, do the backup, ship that to S3, and then another CloudWatch event will fire, turn off the EC2 instance. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's hardly the simplest solution at all, by no means, but it was a solid hands-on learning experience. And so I got to learn how to do the Lambda thing. So that was neat. And now it's, okay, cool. Ongoing challenges, yeah. So moving forward, there's a lot of stuff to consider. Like, maintenance is always an issue, maintaining the existing apps. The admin currently has always been running for like almost a year and a half, I think. Really needs some upgrading dependency-wise. It is Node and React after all, and we're like, very far behind in that regard. New feature development. What happens when people, and by people I mean volunteers and DJs and the public, ask for a new feature such as an embedded audio player, which has been something we've talked about a lot. Also, infrastructure upgrades. Yeah, so we had this giant rack that was our streaming server. It was massive and weighed 600 pounds or so, and sounded like it was going to take off into orbit all the time. So we bought a new one that was about this big, and that's cool. That was like, it's maybe 6 inches square. And yeah, so that needs to be provisioned. It needs to be whatever, all that stuff. So that's a thing that you have to be aware of as possible. And also onboarding new developers. So it's a good way to do this. It's really hard to know. People have different skill levels and ease with which they can be onboarded. But what's the right technology to do that? Do you use Docker? Do you use Vagrant? Do you use Cloud9? These are all questions. Not everyone uses Macs. So finally, why is what Descartes said. And this is actually simple. Like, why would you want to do this stuff? Well, one, you have to love what you're doing. Two, it's probably, if it's community oriented, like helping people, helping the community is always nice. You could do it for DIY, sort of the DIY ethos as well, or to learn something new and get a new skill. So there's some like volunteer tips and tricks for like whatever, tips and tricks for, if you want to take on tasks like this. One, look for services that offer nonprofit discounts or free tiers. Like, for instance, AWS has a free tier for a year. It's pretty cool. One of our sponsors, New Relic, has a free tier for APM, which is really nice. Thanks. This company, Snipcart, which is a checkout service for our shop storefront, is almost free. They're really great. Yeah, so start with and do as much as you can with free services and open source software. Design systems that can be swapped out easily for different services when scale is a concern, like moving the Mongo from self-hosted to Atlas was like 0 effort. It's like changing a string in an environment variable or whatever. So portability is a concern when you need to scale. Anyway, I have no idea how long I've been talking, but I apologize if I've gone over. Thanks. The Freeform Portland GitHub has all of our stuff. There's a bunch of stuff on there. Mine, I also have stuff. If you want to contact me, that's my email. And then lastly, Freeform Portland rules, and I would encourage you to be one of us. That's from the Lost Boys. Anyways, thanks for coming with me on that one. Thanks to Donut.js for being so great, and for everybody who's listening, and thanks.